Are you looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this football and basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select two or more players, pick more or less on their projections for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the PrizePicks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, PrizePicks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/bluewire and use code BLUEWIRE. That's code BLUEWIRE at prizepicks.com/bluewire for a first deposit match of up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Hello, friends. Welcome to Pod Maverick After Dark. This is Kirk Henderson and Josh Bowe. If you are listening on our podcast streams, I want you all to know that for the first time ever, Josh Bowe and I are actually deciding to record video, which is getting posted to our newly founded YouTube channel, Pod Maverick, which I will post in the show notes. If you are watching this screen, you have had to either stumbled upon us or you have listened to us for the better part of 4 years and hopefully did not know what we look like. Unfortunately, now you have to look at us. We're joining you guys a little bit before 9 o'clock here on, what is it, March 27th. It's a Monday. The Dallas Mavericks played the Indiana Pacers. It was the Mavericks' second game on a back-to-back, where they played a Pacers team that, trying to think how to phrase this delicately. If they're like that was like the tanking ideal, where you have a team that doesn't really have anything to play for and there's no real incentive to win. So they rested 4 of their 5 starters, I think. And the Mavericks proceeded to slowly wipe the floor with them until it was just no longer a contest.
Yeah, I think we were wondering how low can the Mavericks sink, after losing 2 games back to back to Charlotte. And I guess that's as low as it gets. It doesn't get lower. There is a bottom to this Mavericks season, and I guess we saw it on Sunday. So now we can see if they can get back out of it. Yeah, I know the Hornets were missing, LaMelo Ball and Terry Rozier, so it's not like they had their full guys either. But I mean, I would argue Washington, they still had Gordon Hayward, who used to be an all-star, and they still had, Dennis Smith Jr., say what you will, but he's a veteran now. The Pacers not only played a bunch of backups, but they, they're all either rookies or second-year players. And it was just, and you could see it. And, the Mavericks just kind of did what they wanted. They made threes, surprise, surprise. And they had a big win. So
they made a lot of threes. They hit 18 on the game. And I think they didn't hit very many in the first quarter.
No.
And then they proceeded to just rain hellfire for the rest of the game. 18 of 37, near just a shade under 50%. There's not really much another team is going to do in that regard if you shoot that well.
It doesn't matter how the Mavericks have been playing. When you have a 10-point advantage, not 10 points, 10 made field goal advantage in threes, which is that's 30 points. It doesn't matter how many offensive rebounds the Mavericks gave up, which they gave up a lot. It doesn't matter how many points in the paint the Pacers score, which wasn't a lot for once, but this was just an impossible game for them to lose. Those 2 Hornets games, they shot pretty rough from 3, and that's the team. If they make significantly more threes than their opponent, they win. If they don't, they lose. And I know it's kind of silly to break it down that simply, but that's what it's felt like for the last month. So,
well, and I had one fan, guy Leo, love Leo, shout out to Leo if you're actually listening to this, who said this team is killing him. Can't they do one thing right? Because I think after they lost yesterday to the Hornets, the general notion was, okay, the Mavericks should tank. And the Mavericks should tank, if we're being quite honest. But what they should do and what they're going to do are 2 different things. And then there's also the third factor of what do they have the ability to do? And in my opinion, at least this early on, the Mavericks don't have a lot of, there's still how many 7 games to play, and for them
6
to
games, I think
6 games, okay,
yeah.
for them to really like sink in this regard, they I don't think they can tank in the way that people like associate with tanking. There's not a lot of stuff that they're going to be able to do to really, throw themselves for a loop, because unless there's like a nagging injury, I don't think the team wants to shut Luka down. He sells tickets. I think the league would like the Mavericks to at least, make a play for the play-in. And, even with some of these guys that were like, oh, they're not on NBA teams, they wouldn't be on a roster. And we do this when they're really bad, but I don't really see how the Mavericks are I think they lose like 4 of their next 6, but I don't think they lose, they're not going to play 500 ball. They're not going to, this is going to be one of these things where I think fans get pretty upset because they want them to tank, but the Mavericks aren't I don't think they're gonna, even though we would like to see them less Ruka.
I mean, the only it's kind of like 2 different conversations, because it's like, what's best for the team to build a championship roster as soon as you can while Luka is still on his 2nd contract. And it's like, well, no, duh. You look at where this team is, they're still 2 games under 500. Like, of course, a top 10 pick, like considering that they don't really have much to work with as far as cap space and as far as what they can trade. They've got basically 2 young players and they can trade 2 distant first rounders. Like, that's it. And it's like, that's cool. But we just saw, I don't know if you pay attention to NBA trades lately, unless you're trading for damaged goods, it takes like 2 to 3 and more to get, picks and plus additional stuff to get like one really good player. I mean, like OG Anunoby was reportedly going for like 3 first rounders. And it's like, and he's not even an all-star. Like, he would be a perfect guy for this Mavericks team, but it's like, they can't even afford that right now. So like, of course a top 10 pick would be more beneficial than them getting the 8th seed and losing in 5 games to the Nuggets in the first round or losing in the play-in,
Yep.
But they can't, like, they're all healthy now. I mean,
Nope.
you have Kyrie's foot injury. That's like maybe the only thing that's really they can get away with. But like, the only way they could tank is if they sat guys. And at this point, it would be so blatantly obvious. They just can't get away with it. The NBA would find them. The players, you've said this a million times. The players don't tank. Like, the players would probably be pretty pissed off. Like, they don't care about how the team needs to build a roster. They want to win games. Like, that's why they play. So they're going to want to win. And the only way they can't right now is if they benched everyone. But I mean, and again, just this game, because this is a terrible Indiana team. They could play everyone fully healthy and lose the next 3 just because they're playing Philly, Miami, and Atlanta on the road. Like that. I mean, that wouldn't shock and it wouldn't shock anyone if they went 0-3 even at full strength. But like, that's just like, it was just weird. Like, they were 1 game back of 10th after they of the 10th place after they lost the Hornets. So as awful as this team is right now in terms of like expectations and stuff, the season wasn't technically over as much as we felt like thematically it was kind of over.
Right. And I had kind of a really dark thought today that what if that Lakers last second shot was something that like buried them out of being in the lottery. Let's circle back to sort of that level of talk and kind of briefly touch on the game a little bit. It was an odd game despite the Mavericks really winning. They played a ton of people. Every single person on the roster that dressed tonight, which looks like all 15 guys, played at least 5 minutes, which is kind of remarkable in with how short a bench they played. You got like Marcus Morris grabbing 11 minutes. Kyrie Irving played like the team high 30, which of course he did with a hurt foot. Just of course he did. That said, he kind of got back on track, at least in terms of making buckets. 7-11 from the floor, had 6 helpers, was a starter's high plus 26 when he was out there on the floor. Luka was pretty standard, awesome Luka, 25 points, 7 rebounds, 6 helpers, and 0 turnovers, which I thought was pretty interesting, including like the pass, which you will see around the world tomorrow if you're paying attention to anything Maverick related, where he just hit an absolutely, I don't even know how to describe it. He's on the right baseline, top of the screen if you're watching on television, not too far from the corner, kind of short corner area, and he gets trapped and he does like a spinning jump pass that seems to like bullet time underneath the backboard. And he found Jaden Hardy for 3, right?
Yep.
And thank God, Jaden Hardy. Congratulations on being the Maverick who hits the cool shot after the cool Luka pass. We have seen way too many of this, the missed shots after Luka does something absolutely wizard-like over the last few years. So that was pretty fun. Trying to think like what else from this game like really jumped out to me. JaVale McGee played for the first time in 100 years, and he was productive. And I've already seen some like JaVale should play more, and it's like, guys, stop it. This is JaVale McGee we're talking about here. Yeah, he had 10 points in 13 minutes. He also still managed to have 2 turnovers. Remarkable stuff from our man there.
And only 2 rebounds in 13 minutes, which is weird.
Well, that's another weird stat. So I just want to like shout out to everybody. Like the Mavericks had 33 team rebounds, and Luka had 7 team high. After that, Josh Green has 4 rebounds. Jaden Hardy has 4 rebounds. Kyrie Irving has 6 rebounds. Really?
No, Kyrie Irving had 3.
Oh, sorry. Kyrie, that's his assists. Like, just true inability to go grab the ball. I'm almost impressed with the Mavericks' ability to not rebound. Shocking in some regards.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I think the Pacers had 4 offensive rebounds on 1 possession early in the first quarter, and I think that was when everyone was like, oh boy, here we go again, because the first quarter was relatively competitive compared to the rest of the game. And then the Mavericks just decided they're going to make all of their 3-pointers so you can get as many offensive rebounds as you like. We're just going to 3 is greater than 2, and it doesn't really matter. Of course, they did much better on their 2s today. I think this was one of their best 2-point nights in a while. This was Kyrie's first like productive game since that Lakers game. He came back. He had the foot injury.
Well, he played pretty well against Memphis right up until he hurt his foot.
Yeah. And since then, he's been, he had the bad fourth quarter to Memphis, 2 bad Charlotte games. And so he kind of rebounded very nicely. He only had 16 points because the game was just, he didn't need to do anymore. So yeah, McGee played well. We'll see. Again, the Pacers big man lineup was Jalen Smith and Isaiah Jackson. I will say it's nice that McGee had a good night. And the Mavericks won against Jalen Smith, because if not, the first thing I would have brought up is that Jalen Smith was a free agent last summer and signed for a contract less than JaVale McGee did with the Mavericks. So that would have been a dark, demented place we would have been in talking about that. But hey, it didn't happen. And Maxey didn't play second night back-to-back. Probably a good thing considering how he's been playing lately.
Frankly,
that's mean, but I mean,
well, if they want any chance of beating Joel Embiid, Maxey Kleber has to play.
Right, and he has to not look like how he looked for most of the minutes against those 2 Hornets games. So,
yep.
We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. One of the things I love about Indeed is it makes hiring all in one place so easy and streamlined so I can spend more time on the rest of my business. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
It's a funny game because, of course, the Mavericks get almost a 30-point win when basically everyone from the fan base to even not just national media, but local media to even media members that we consider to always be looking on the sunny side up of things, even kind of showed the cracks in the armor. So of course the Mavericks won. And we'll just see. Like, I don't know. I might be sick in the head, but there's like a weird part of me that thinks they're going to win in Philadelphia just because it feels like the theme of this Maverick season is just we're going to do the opposite of whatever you think we're going to do.
Yeah, and now there's a few things I'd like to talk about as we close out the show, because again, not a lot to talk about tonight, kind of making chicken salad out of chicken shit here. The first is your column. The second is Haralabob's series of tweets. Let's start with your column that you wrote late last night that basically gets into the nuts and bolts of the fact that there is no team and Bill Simmons actually talked about a little bit of what you were talking about today, that the situation the Mavericks have put Luka Doncic in is unlike any for an under 25 superstar in the league right now. And as you got into the nuts and bolts of it, unlike any and really ever, like,
yeah,
what you and I have been harping on team building since 2019, really, really harsh. I went back and listened to our 2019 free agency pod today where we just kicked the shit out of them. And you got it. Well, go ahead and talk about it a little bit. Talk about your column, even if
I think something I've been noticing and I haven't talked about too much. I think I've hinted at it in a podcast, but I haven't wrote it because, quite frankly, every time I write, anytime I felt like this Maverick season is either A, back on track, or B, totally end and off the rails, the very next game they either went, like they just kind of do the opposite. Like, I mean, I honestly thought maybe we should pack this season in when they lost to Indiana on February 28th, and then the very next game they beat the Philadelphia 76ers, who like went on like a 20-game win streak after they lost to the Mavs, and it's like, okay, maybe they're back, and then they lose again, and then it's like, okay, they're done. Oh well, they just beat San Antonio and Los Angeles. Maybe they're back, and then they lose, and so it's been tough for me to want to like put the nail in the coffin, despite how bad those two Hornets losses I think kind of drove me there. And it's been what I've been thinking about all season is just we see so often how much Luka is compared to the greats of all time because he just keeps doing these ridiculous things and putting up numbers that we haven't seen before. And every time it's like Luka is the first player to do this since Oscar Robinson or Wilt Chamberlain or Kevin Durant or Tim Duncan. Like it happens, like it's been happening like every other week, it feels like, with him since he's been drafted. Just like Luka is the first 20-year-old to do this. He's the first 21-year-old to do this. Or, he's the second 22-year-old to make it to this.
Like you could do something every game to a degree.
Yeah, he's just been unbelievable. And then you look at who he's been compared to in these first four, almost 5 seasons now. And it's basically like Hall of Famer, Hall of Famer, Hall of Famer, Hall of Famer. No duh. Like he's had maybe the best start to a career just in terms of statistical production that we've seen in, NBA history. And so you start comparing. So I was like, okay, that's cool. And now it's like, well, wait, how many of those guys were in 11th place in their conference when they were 24 years old? And I started looking and I couldn't find anyone. Just every single guy, LeBron, Dirk, Giannis, George Gervin, even looking back older, Larry Bird, Kevin Durant, Kobe Bryant, Kevin Garnett, just whoever you want to look at in terms of like, not like an all-star, just like a franchise-altering talent, superstar that can carry a team. Michael Jordan. I didn't even say Michael Jordan. Every time I looked up, I was like, okay, so what was their team doing when they were 24 years old? And it's like 60 wins, conference finals, winning the finals, 55 wins, 52 wins, 53 wins. Like, this doesn't happen. You don't see a player as good as Luka Doncic at this stage of his career on a team that might miss the playoffs. And not only miss the playoffs, like, I mean, they might make the play-in. Like, if this were a couple of years ago, it would feel even worse. Like, I mean, it's just like not even 9th or 8th place, like 11th place, and this many games under, 3 games under 500. It doesn't happen because I'm not breaking any news here. Basketball is probably the one professional sport where one individual talent can just overwhelm and influence the game, like more so than almost any other sport, aside from like a quarterback in football. But even then, football has so many players on the field that even with a good quarterback, there's so much more you have to account for. Yep. It's like basketball, there are 5 guys on the floor. Like one guy can just absolutely dominate. And it's typically one guy is enough. If one in that hierarchy, like if one guy reaches that limit, that's usually enough to make the playoffs, even if the rest of the team isn't that great. I mean, we just saw Nikola Jokic without Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. last year. They were the 6th seed. And we saw Kobe Bryant after Shaquille O'Neal left. I think they had like one bad season, but even he led them to a couple playoff seasons before Paul Gasol got there with like Lamar Odom.
Yep.
It's like you can only fall so far when you have a superstar. And usually the farthest you fall is like a first round out in the playoffs. Like the fact that we are seriously in danger, the Mavericks are, of missing the playoffs entirely, finishing with a top 10 lottery pick, you can maybe count on one hand how many times that's happened to Hall of Fame level superstar talents when they were 24 years old. And that's what I wanted to get the point across, because there's definitely going to be some hand waving about why the Mavericks season is as bad as it is. But we just have to consider like this. You can try to run a team blindfolded and you wouldn't get a situation as bad as the Mavericks are with Luka. Like it's almost impressive that the Mavericks have managed to make a bad team with Luka Doncic as a 24-year-old. Like it's really hard to do.
And some of my kind of problem here, I've often, just due to the Mavericks PR machine, they're, a lot of local sports fan stuff, I've often felt like we're the problem for going a little too far with how we've criticized their team building. This season has validated all of our criticisms. And that's really unfortunate because nobody wants their team to stink. And the historical comparisons are really fascinating to me because I saw you having to do this both in the comments and on Twitter where you're like, this is the point that they've messed all this up. And we can, sit here and hope for better things. But you even tweeted this out yesterday, like their cheat code is really, they need to luck into a lottery pick and then either trade out of that pick, which would make me fly off the handle because I love draft season, or select somebody who can come and help and contribute immediately. Now, I think we should talk about that latter stuff at a different day just because we wanted this to be a shorter show. But where they've gone and where they are right now is just it's nothing short of extremely disappointing. And I think that it was really something over today, both on all the national podcasts I listened to, and then the local coverage really flip a switch. Tim McMahon of ESPN roasted them on local radio and on his own the podcast that he goes on, the Hoop Collective. And it's just kind of shocking because I think where I fail often as a, like, I don't know, I guess we're media members.
Yeah,
we don't go to games. Yeah. But we don't it's really surprising to me to watch sourced people choose when to unload both barrels because access is like, it's precious and you really got to be careful with that sort of things. You don't want to piss off the wrong person at the right time because you're not going to get the story later. But watching that sort of stuff today was really interesting to me. So,
yeah, I mean, that's when it's bad. Like, that's when it's like, hey, it's not just us. Like, we could finally point to some other things. But yeah, it's not great. And like, to be honest, I'm sure someone's going to leave a comment that's like, I can't believe you guys are still talking like they won by 30. And it's just like, I'm sorry, they just lost 2. After what we just witnessed,
they might have missed out on the plan. Like, as far as because of those 2 games. I mean, I had a guy who messaged me today, goes, you mean they lost to the Hornets twice? He didn't know. He thought it was 1 game. He's like, twice in a row? I was like, yeah, it's that bad.
Yeah. Like, it's just we're at the point where it's like, how can you get jazzed up about a win like this when the next 3 games are Philly, Miami, Atlanta, and then Sacramento? The first 3 are all like, it's like they don't play another team that has nothing to play for till the last game of the season, San Antonio. Indiana, Charlotte, the last 3 games, they're 1-3, they're 1-2, and those teams are awful. Like, I can't emphasize enough that like Indiana's record is a little fool's goldy because they started off really well, and then when Halliburton got hurt, they were like, all right, let's pack this in. If they played how they've played like the last 3 or 4 months for the whole season, they would be right next to Houston, San Antonio, and Charlotte. So, like, these. And then you lost to Golden State the road Golden State is also like it's just hard for me to get back on the horse, and I know that's dangerous because we know this Mavericks team loves to just the Mavericks love to make whatever is going to make us argue the most, right? Like that's what they do. I wrote that column. They're the discourse team, and
I was around game 15.
Yeah. And if they follow that, they're going to win on Wednesday, right? They're going to win on Wednesday, and everyone's going to be like, how dare you guys write off this team?
I don't know, man. Everybody's been pretty sick. Like, there's kind of a uniform. It's like, what do we do next? And that's really the difficult part because it seems they might be in no man's land. They might really be in no man's land, and that really stinks. The last thing I wanted to talk about was something that I disagreed with Haralabos Voulgaris on this. He posted a thread, screenshots. Now, granted, smarter man than I, so I'm disagreeing from my point of limited knowledge. But he really went at the Mavericks' sort of attack with Kyrie and Luka on the floor, and talking about how little they utilize Luka and Kyrie in actions, and kind of like, what's the point of that? Like, why would you get these two guys if you're not going to use them together? And my thought, I have two thoughts. Well, one of them's original, and one of them somebody told me. The first is that if you go back and watch a lot of classic LeBron Kyrie tape, they did this too. And they just mowed teams down on offense. Like, it was fine. The second thing, and this is a much more interesting insight, Matt Moore passed this along to me. He said when he asked a similar question, it's like, well, when you pair your two best players together in an action, you're also most likely getting the two best defenders from the other team involved in that same action. So if you're bringing two good defenders to the ball, that can create a different set of problems. I thought that was an interesting insight. I don't necessarily agree with Haralabos. I think the Mavericks offense is vanilla at points because Luka wants it to be. He wants to run the things he wants to run. Mm-hmm. And until you can convince him otherwise, either through coaching and results, then that's the part where I agree with. It's like, if he thinks it's on them, the coaching staff, then he's right. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's I mean, the numbers with Kyrie and Luka on the floor are like offensively are great. So it's hard to be too picky about the usage. It just sticks out because the Mavericks have played like 8 million. I mean, what was it? They've played 50 clutch games this season.
Yes.
So those stand out more because we've seen so many crunch times possessions where they just don't have it. So that's probably why it just sticks out like a sore thumb, because we just notice all these clutch time possessions that they aren't capitalizing on. And so that sticks out. So that's one thing. And then I think his better point that he made, that I more agreed with, was I think someone responded to him and was like, how can you, well, Kyrie and Luka and LeBron worked out pretty well. And his counter was, well, yeah, at one point LeBron was like the best defensive player on the planet. And it's like hard to argue with that one, like you can get away with maybe an unimaginative offense when those two guys are just so singularly brilliant offensively, but also, I mean, LeBron on Cleveland in the playoffs in 2016, he was probably one of the best defender on the floor. And that's including like Draymond Green, who's going to go down as one of the greatest defenders of all time. Like, I saw the Andre Iguodala block. Like, I'm sorry, but Luka, it's going to take a while to Luka to get to that, if ever. So that's probably the biggest thing. Like, I don't worry about the offense, but it's like, it's kind of it's a bigger version of like what we worried about with Luka and Brunson. It's like, can your two highest paid players both be at their ceilings average defensively? Usually one of your two best players is a good defender, you would think.
Right.
So, even with the Warriors, like Stephen Clay, if you want to say it was Stephen Clay before Durant got there, I mean, Clay before the Achilles was a great defender. And then you had Draymond behind that. So that's more of the thing that's going to be interesting. And that's what's, they're going to drive the team building, I think, more than anything. Like, the offense is just like, it's a thing, but like on the list of things, it's not even on my radar,
Right.
Like, there's just so many other things that matter more to me in terms of what has to be fixed. All right. I just looked it up while we're talking. With Kyrie and Luka on the floor cleaning the glass, the Mavs are scoring 121 points per 100 possessions.
Yeah, we're fine.
Does it suck that Kyrie stands in the corner sometimes? Yeah, but hey, guess what? Kyrie's also one of the best spot-up shooters in the league. So maybe it's not the best use case of him, but he's also really good at standing in the corner and making threes. So, like, what are you going to do right now?
Love that. Okay. Well, we're out of we're out of stuff here, and we still talk for 25 plus minutes. So for those of you who are watching, we don't know what the hell we're doing. We're figuring this out as we go. We're learning. We're joining a new podcast company tomorrow, who will hopefully give us some new insight and things we need to do with regards to this sort of thing. So we're going to figure it out as we go. We're going to learn. So please be patient with us in that regard. Offer any thoughts or commentary. Can't wait for the first asshole to call us ugly in comments and that sort of thing. I love that stuff. But I'm married anyways, and so are you, so we don't care. That's the point of getting married early. You lock them down before they realize that you're going to look differently in 15 years. For those of you listening, please continue to subscribe. Leave us reviews. We'll be changing back ends, I'm pretty sure too, but that shouldn't change all the artwork and all the stuff that we've established the last couple of weeks. Really pleased with that. Shout out to our guy Matt at Mavs Moneyball, who has helped with that. That's kind of all I got. Anything else for you?
No, I think that's about it. Let's get out of here and get ready for the well-rested Joel Embiid.
That's right. That's right. All right, Kirk Henderson and Josh Bowe, this has been Pod Mavericks After Dark. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk with you soon.